Hi everyone, I have some interesting news about the prototype in Poppy Playtime Chapter 5, because the director of Chapter 1 to 3, a guy called Isaac, has confirmed that the original story for the games ended in Chapter 5, and he's now not sure how long it will go on for. This by itself is quite interesting, however he's currently doing a Q&A on Twitter, I guess X, formerly Twitter, and he gave some very interesting early details into the concept of the prototype and how the design of the prototype has actually changed. I just want to start by reading verbatim what he said, and this is actually quite recent and quite surprising. The prototype was always planned to be Ollie and have a jester head, but his original design was very similar to Catnap's shrine, with a body of scrap, human parts, and the remains of toys he wished to make an example of. There were several small toys, plus Mummy, Catnap, and Doey's heads. One of my favourite cut bits was the several grab packs in his back, which he could use to lift himself and chase after you. He was meant to be a very, very intelligent character. He spoke with little malice and was far more focused on observation. I think the biggest writing difference is that the old prototype would never speak as though he knew he was the bad guy. That was the one thing he never got. So this is paradigm shifting news, honestly, because we always thought that there was a coherence regarding the prototype. Like, we were told that Chapter 5 had been in development since the start or for many years, and that the idea for the prototype was always there, but no. Because let's go through what Isaac has said just now. The original design was very similar to Catnap's shrine. Now what I've noticed after the last week or so is that a lot of people are saying that Catnap should have their eyes checked because their shrine looks quite dissimilar to the prototype we ended up getting, and now we know it's because there was a different prototype in mind when that Catnap shrine was made, with a body of scrap human parts and the remains of toys he wished to make an example of. That's so interesting because my original reaction to the prototype's design, although I love the one that we got and we know that they were always planned to be a jester, I was kind of thinking like, Catnap was very specific about including an entire human corpse in their shrine, so the fact we didn't get any human remains other than the bone marrow-like material in the arms and around the chest, that's very interesting, but no, they were always meant to be more human. The idea that Mob Entertainment changed the design of the prototype under no pressure whatsoever is so strange. Now, we know that there have been some structural changes to Mob Entertainment. Perhaps structural isn't the exact correct word, but we know that a lot of the staff left at one point, we know that there have been a lot of projects coming and going in the background, and we know that the team in general has gotten bigger or much more active. And we know that Isaac was only the director of Chapter 1 to 3, so I have it in my mind that there was an idea for the prototype and the concept that they built the Catnap shrine off died after Chapter 3. Now there is quite a different vibe to Chapter 4 and 5. These are generally more narrative, graphics wise and lore wise there are differences, but we always thought that the story was planned out. Coming back after 15 years, no matter how diverted we got from why we started this adventure in the first place. We always thought the story was set in stone. We always thought they had something planned, and now we know that isn't true, at least as it relates to the prototype. Anyway, Isaac went on. There were several small toys, plus Mummy, Catnap and Doey's heads. So the prototype was going to have multiple heads. They were. And I said in the run up to Chapter 5 that I would be very surprised if they didn't, and when they were announced I was very surprised they only had one. That's really intensely interesting news. Also, there was no Doey representation in the final prototype at all. Absolutely, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I guarantee you looking back, I can't see any Doey on this thing at all. It was going to have several small toys, plus Mummy, Catnap and Doey's heads. I suppose small toys is probably referring to the smiling critters maybe? Plus Mummy Longleg's head, which we saw get taken at the end of Chapter 2. Again, where did that go? Catnap, we saw them get taken, where did they go? Other than a very small amount of Catnap's fur which was used in the end. And then there was no Doey representation in the final design. So what Isaac had in mind, or what they had planned and absolutely no doubt designed at some point, I can only imagine how much concept art there was. That is so different. That's more different than I can really sort of think of at the moment. But the biggest change, and I don't even know why they made this, with the several grab packs in its back. This thing was going to be able to chase after you using your own technology. We've never had a villain use a grab pack before, and that would have been perfect because, you know, it was only ever rumours that Chapter 5 was the end of Poppy Playtime, right? But a villain using a grab pack thematically, that would have been something coming full circle, right? I would have loved that. This is so strange to see. He spoke with little malice and was far more focused on observation. That literally feels like what we knew about the prototype in the first few chapters. You know, the theorists that be, they'll be thinking back to the ARGs and the VHSs. And also, apparently Isaac, he's saying that the original story ended in Chapter 5. Like, it has ended. The original story is over. But like, how long has that been the case? Like, we don't have any closure. The original story isn't over. We went into Playtime Code to find these workers, and we haven't been explicitly told what's even happened to them. And we've actually had some indications at some point that they're still alive. So I'm not going to take it for a second that the original story is over. That's a lie. The biggest writing difference is that the old prototype, and the fact he calls it the old prototype, would never speak as though he knew he was the bad guy. That's a massive difference. They had a really clear vision in mind for the prototype, and they changed it under zero pressure. When it comes to the prototype, we knew that they had legs and we knew that they had hands. They didn't have to change any of this. They could have kept the grab packs, they could have kept the multiple heads and hands and toys and small whatever. They could have kept the multiple toys. I'm really surprised. I'm surprised that the smiling critters didn't have any representation. I'm surprised the nightmare critters didn't have any representation. I'm surprised the Outermals didn't appear on the prototype at all. And I'm surprised that there are no traces of Doughy. I'm very surprised that we were meant to have a mummy Longlegs head on it. Do you know how big the prototype is? Do you know how big Catnap is? I can only imagine, and I guarantee you concept art will come out sooner rather than later regarding this redesign. But this is like, it's Mob Entertainment folding under no pressure. They could have designed the prototype however they wanted, and yes, there were changes. But who could have been so desperate to redesign a prototype? To redesign their main villain that was already Jester themed in the way that they did? Because it sounds like, you know, think about what the original prototype would have had. Grab packs, Catnap's head, Mummy's head, etc. They were all taken off. You know, nothing was actually gained in this new prototype redesign. What Isaac is talking about here are things that it was going to have that were now taken off it, and I don't know why they would do that. I mean, okay, there could have been some reason, like, for example, I imagine that the prototype using grab packs to move around would be a nightmare program. In the end, the prototype kind of scurries up walls like a spider, and it does seem at least like having spider legs was always the right idea. I mean, I guess we always knew that they would have those kind of legs, but there is so much here that they're not telling us. And it really isn't kind of the news I expected to get today. You know, Chapter 5 is getting a bit of a hard time at the moment. If you saw Markiplier's playthrough, which some of you may have seen or read about, Markiplier did not like Chapter 5. I remember that Queso, a big streamer that I never really sort of watch, he finished Chapter 5, and he was borderline enraged that Chapter 5's story didn't end here. The crux of this controversy, I want to call it kind of like becoming a controversy, the crux of this issue is that the original story didn't end in Chapter 5. And again, it was only ever theories that it would, but the fact that it hasn't, and the fact that we are no closer to getting the answers that we started playing for, are starting to become a big issue. That's one thing, and now the fact that the prototype has already had a mixed reaction, that I've catalogued in 2 separate videos, was going to be completely different, and more like people wanted it to be like, it's such a strange development, isn't it? People wanted the prototype to have multiple heads, people wanted there to be several small toys on the prototype, and having the grab packs on it, that's something that would have taken us completely by surprise. You know, there's a quote that gets thrown around that Mob Entertainment said the final prototype design would be better than 90% of fan designs, whatever it was, 90, 95, I do believe them. But I believe that that was their mentality with this original design, and that is no longer the case. I didn't see a single fan design that had grab packs on it. And I thought I'd let you know this because this is a really strange development, and it does bring into question the cohesion of Poppy Playtime and how many other elements of the franchise were planned and what else changed after Chapter 3. You know, the cohesiveness of the story isn't confirmed. Nothing's certain anymore. Because if anything was always going to be certain, it was going to be the way that Mob thought about the prototype. So that's a very interesting development there. I want to know what you think of this, so please leave me a comment. You know, I started making videos when I was 9. I'm 21 years old, and I finally unlocked channel memberships. So if you want to see more like this, if you want to give me ideas, then please, go for it.